So I'd like to start you off on a Mexico adventure here. I've spent most of my time in northeastern Mexico, and I thought, oh boy, I'd love to do agaves of northeastern Mexico. Oh, Brian Kimball's doing that on Friday afternoon. I want to save Baja California for the Phoenix convention in 2 years, which I'll be more prepared for. So I figured I'd do a little western Mexico for you. About 2 years ago, Brian and I decided to try and get down to the Jalisco area, which I have not spent hardly any time in. I blasted through there one time, 1985 I think it was. So that's been almost 30 years at that point. So I figured it was time to revisit Jalisco and then the western Mexico area. So Brian and I made arrangements. We were going to drive down and get down to the Guadalajara area, where Martin and Julia were so kind to say, yes, you could come down here, and Julia would like to, she ended up taking us around to show us some of the recently described agaves and some other interesting things. It turns out that Walker, a couple of Brian's cohorts from Ruth Bancroft Garden, Walker Young and Laura Hogan and her husband Bill decided to fly down to Guadalajara. They rented a van, so Brian and I were driving down there, racing the plane. We got down there at about the same time, and we got into the rented van, and Julia was so kind to take us out for 5 or 6 days and show us some beautiful agaves, of which I'll show you a few. Julia's going to show you more of them, and she'll probably show you a lot of echeverias on Friday as well. So I didn't show any echeverias or crassulaceae in this talk. But let's get going here. I said from border to border, an agave-centric view of western Mexico. Well, it just depends on which border to border we're going to go to. So we'll figure that out as we go. It's a big enough group here that I think we're going to need 4 vehicles on this trip. A couple of them might be a little bit, let's say, maybe not roadworthy, but let's pop this one back up onto the road, and everybody can hop into this. If you can't fit into that, surely you can ride along in this one. We won't need air conditioning, good thing, because none of these have air conditioning. The third vehicle may be a little bit more roadworthy if we can get it back upright and get that one on the road. And finally, we'll take the one that will actually get us up the hills when we need to go uphill. So what I'd like to do is find the pointer here. I've drawn out, ideally what I would like to have covered. I ended up going a little bit short here. We didn't go into Sonora, so we can cover that at a later date. But we'll spend some time down around in the Jalisco area, down in here, and see some of these recently described agaves, of which I had not seen until 2 years ago. Jalisco is a hotbed for agaves. Now Julia scanned this list very quickly, Martin as well. I've got 24 species here. Did I miss any? She says, don't put me on the spot. So I'm going to go with 24 species here. There are a lot of them. So Jalisco is one of the hotbeds for agave diversity. Oaxaca and Puebla area is another hotbed, and northwestern Sonora is another major area for agave diversity. Here's Julia, Brian, and Walker up on the Volcan de Tequila, looking for actually Echeveria colorata here. But before we get up to there, we go see agave shedigra. Now, I was walking around Huntington yesterday with Peter Breslin, and we saw the most amazing agave shedigras. They had to be, 6 feet across? It was incredible. So whoever's watering those things, stop it. They should only be about 2 feet in diameter, so those things were incredible. So agave shedigra is a very widespread species in Mexico, and we'll encounter it more than one time, I'm sure. But very beautiful plants, no teeth on the leaf edges. Those teeth are replaced by the filaments, or the filifers on the leaf edges. They do have sharp tips, but not very lethal. This particular population had really nice white markings on the leaf tops, the bud prints, and very thick marginal fibers. So very vegetationless area up here just north of Guadalajara. Sometimes the agaves turn very purplish red. They were incredible colors. So we had the green, the purple, the red. They were very beautiful plants. You can see nicely filled out plants in the background and then really good colored plants here. And I think that talking about, well, Panayotti's talk yesterday, if you were here, and the crevice gardening, I think that would be a very good use for some agaves here. And I'm going to try that myself with agave pelona and agave turneri and see if it works out for those. And possibly, yes, Steve, agave utahensis. More agave shadiguras with the highly marked leaves on these plants. They have a very good population up there. Then a new one for me, agave radowskiana. It's in the striati group, and you can see it looks much like agave striata or agave stricta, but it grows on these cliffs and these slopes nearby. Beautiful plants. Makes individual rosettes are about 1.5 feet in diameter, and then the clumps will get about twice that size. Walker and I portraying Running Man around agave guadalajarana here. It's an interesting plant. I've grown this one in Tucson, and it's actually made it through the frost without much protection. I'll put one layer of frost cloth over it, and it'll survive 17 or 18 degrees with that one layer of frost cloth. So it'll be probably subject to about 20 degrees under that frost cloth. And it does very well for me, which was surprising, seeing as how far south it comes from. Hectia species, for my Hectia lover friends out there. I don't know what species it is. Any ideas from anybody in the Jalisco area? No, nobody's going to volunteer a species. Andy couldn't identify this one either because I didn't know if it was a terminal or a lateral inflorescence, so he said forget it, he wouldn't even try. So it's a beautiful Hectia growing on the cliffs. We've got some with more green in the leaves on these guys, a little bit more red, and then some that get more red yet, purpley red on here. So these cliff dwellers are extremely interesting plants. Tillandsia mariana, Andy was able to give me a question mark on this one, but I think that's what that one is. It's another interesting plant growing on the volcanic areas here with the little pockets of soil the seed falls into and the plants start growing there. And they are amazing to hang on to, these cliff faces. Mammillaria jaliscana, a little tiny thing here with the golf ball sized heads and the hook spines on them. Very pretty plants. So around the Tequila area, we're going to head up into the Volcan de Tequila in a minute, but we entered Tequila, which I had never been into that town, so we go there and sample some wares there. Here we run through a field of agave tequilana on our way to the next most interesting plant, agave chazaroi. I had not seen this one before, and we got to get up close and personal with this. I love the color combination with the bright green leaves and the really dark red soil there. I've tried this one in cultivation in Tucson. It does not like it below about 30 degrees, so it needs some protection here. So if you don't drop below 40 degrees, you can grow this outside. No problem at all in Santa Barbara, I'm sure. Jeff, do you have some of these growing? He gives me the thumbs up. They'll do well there. Beautiful plant, very attractive species here. Again, no spines on the leaf edges or no teeth on the leaf edges. It's got the terminal spine, and it grows on these sheer vertical walls. Another new one for me was agave valenciana. It's a giant species. It's related to agave gypsophila, and then there were some split outs from that, which I have not seen yet, so I've got to get further south and east from there. But this is an incredible plant. Again, it's a very big thing. It was about 6 feet in diameter. And for such a large plant, it had tiny little flowers, big inflorescences, but very tiny little flowers. So it's clearly in the same group as gypsophila. Another one that was brand new to me, agave Vasquez Garcia-y. I started to grow this one as well. I suspect it's going to be completely frost sensitive and not be able to take anything below 30 or 32 degrees. But it seems to be related to agave vilmariniana and attenuata and pedunculifera in that group there. So it looks very similar to those guys. We were able to see a lot of variation in these things, and they grew in, we only saw it in one little canyon there. I'm not sure if it's much more widely distributed. I'm kind of glossing through the Guadalajara or the Jalisco agaves. I'm hoping that Julia will show us some more beautiful pictures of these on Friday, and more pictures of them. But I wanted to give you a little taste of some of the new things that are coming out in the agave world. So when you're in the markets, you always have to sample the fruits and vegetables, and they're always such colorful things and very tasty. And then back out into the field. Now, when we were in the field, we kept calling this agave inequitans. And every time we saw it, this was up on the Volcan de Tequila, and it was, oh, it's agave inequitans. And I was putting the presentation together, and I was looking at the pictures, and I was remembering back to Gentry's pictures, and I started reading the descriptions, and Maximiliana is very closely related to it. And this seems to fit Maximiliana better than it does agave inequitans. So that's what I kept calling this when I was putting the presentation together, except one slide I did forget to change. But it's a little bit more tight in the rosette, a little bit more dense. The teeth are a little bit bigger, a little bit more Bovi cornuta-like in the teeth. But the rosettes were definitely a little bit tighter leaves and more symmetrical. I do have a picture of agave inequitans that we'll see the differences in a little bit here. So more agave maximiliana. I love the shape of these things, the beautiful symmetry of the agaves, dark green color, and the incredible bud prints that these teeth make on the leaves. They're fascinating to me. You can look at those bud prints up close and personal and just get lost in some of those different patterns and colors that they'll make. They do color up with the light pinkish red color on the leaf edges on this particular one. Again, that's kind of a stress reaction. If it doesn't have a lot of water, they'll stress up like this and start to color up. We noticed this on the pre-convention tour. We went up to the Agave Montana site up above La Pena, and we were hoping to see some plants with really red leaves. As they flower, they'll really color up into red, purple, red, sometimes orangey yellow as well. But not a lot of plants had really deep color there, and what we were suspecting was that they'd had a lot of recent rainfall, and those plants weren't as stressed. So even though they were flowering and dying off, the color, the chlorophyll dying off in the plants wasn't as pronounced. It wasn't releasing the chlorophyll and then having the anthocyanins show up as profusely as times of when the plants are dying off in times of drought. They seem to color up even more. So we think this is a real stress reaction related to water stress. That one was definitely under some water stress. I love colors on these things, and not just green. They'll give you some good colors as well. So here I did forget to change that label. I still think this is agave maximilianum. But like I said, we'll see agave inequitans, what I think is inequitans, a little bit further along. The best way to tell would be in the flowers, and we didn't get to see a lot of different flowers on these plants, but there would be some differences in the flowers that would tell us for sure. So on the way up and down the Volcan de Tequila, we were actually hiking up to go see Echeverria Colorado, which I left out on purpose because Julia has promised to show some beautiful pictures of these later on, and I know that my pictures wouldn't compare to that, so I'm just going to let you say you have to stick around and see her pictures. But we did see this Disocactus species. Brian, did you ever get a species name for that? Speciosus? Okay, we'll go with that and nobody will argue. Okay, so after an awesome day in the field, well, it was more than one day, but after an awesome day in the field, we have to seek some first-rate accommodations. You can tell they're first-rate accommodations because it's not just the Hotel Chula, It's the hotel motel. It's got an upper balcony here with the outdoor patio. You can sit out there and drink your beers. The other way you can tell it is a high-class hotel is by the outdoor shower and the privacy screen here. So you just hop into the bucket, take your outdoor shower, and you're good to go. Okay, we go back out into the field and wandering around in the mountains out there. We see philodendron species. Can't put a name on this one because we couldn't get close enough and couldn't see any flowers. And I was not about to try and wade through the trees and shrubs of Mexico trying to figure out which philodendron species it is. But this is a really incredible plant. You can see all the stems way up here and then trailing down, draping down over the cliff face here. And the beautiful green leaves at the ends of the stems. Okay, Bill, Laura's husband Bill, was very helpful. He's not only a master at making limericks at the end of the day, he always had, 7 or 10 limericks for us. I don't know how the guy did it, but he was a very good agave spotter. So he got up on top of the rocks for me, and he was looking around, looking in the wrong direction because I see one right down there. Bill, look to your right. Yeah, 6 o'clock. Thank you. No, he's a very fun guy to have along. He's played along with everything. He did find me this beautiful little agave shedigra seedling. Incredible color on it. I love the yellowy green and the purpley red on the edges of the leaves. The threads are just starting to peel back, and it hasn't started making the white markings on the leaves yet. Get a little bit bigger and you see the threads are peeling back a little bit more, and this particular population didn't have heavily white markings on the leaves themselves. Not quite like that population just north of Guadalajara. So again, some beautiful plants. I love these rosettes. And again, the waterer at Huntington, please stop watering your plants. These are only about 1.5 feet across. Now here's what I determined was more pure agave inequitans. You can see the shape difference on this. It's a much more open rosette, fewer leaves, longer leaves. The teeth are a little bit different. So this is more classic to what I interpret as being agave inequitans. Another Tillandsia up there, putting this one in there, and I said, geez, I just don't know what Tillandsias. Email it over to Andy, and he says, yeah, that's Adroviridipetala. I said, great, thanks. Now I'm going to have to try and say that name in front of everybody. But mumble through it, and you can look at the beautiful plant. Again, hanging on the cliffs like this, the sheer vertical walls, and very fuzzy leaves on them. They're beautiful plants. And he said, oh, you remember that other one I identified for you? He says, yeah, it's really different from this one. And I'm looking at the pictures. I'm going, oh boy, they look very similar. He says, well, notice how much whiter the leaves are. And I'm like, yeah, okay, thanks, Andy. But he's very sharp with that. So yeah, I take him at his word. So we drive through the towns, and here's a beautiful example of the great architecture that's found nearly throughout Mexico. I mean, every city you go into has a beautiful church like this. This was in the town of Tocolotlan. Again, extremely nice architecture. I love just the symmetry on these, and the churches are always beautiful things to stop and take pictures of. So we leave Tocolotlan and we head out to the field again, and Dan Marr, this is for you, Bursera bark. I don't know, probably Phageroides elongata, but I don't know. It's got the blue bark underneath the white peely bark. So if I were to throw a species on it just by the bark, that's what I would say. But without, like you know, without flowers or fruit or leaves, you can't do much. And Stenocereus, don't make me say the species, please. Question mark. I don't know, we just saw some more in the field on this last trip. I'm going to take a poll of who all was on the trip, the 20 people. Do you think this is Stenocereus, what it says up there, Querétaroensis? Sure looks like it to me. Dan Marr, another one for you. Bursera spa. I love bursaras. I mean, the bark on them are really nice. They're the New World equivalents to, how did Tim say it? Commiforas. Yes, you're going to get me changing that pronunciation. For years and years and years, I said it the other way, and I'm not going to anymore because it's Commifora. Say it with me. So another bursara with the peely bark, get into that dry tropical deciduous forest, and the bursaras just pop out at you because you can see the bark, the different colored bark from, 5, 6, 7 feet away. You can maybe even see it from 15 feet away, but you wander through the forest and there are these bursaras popping out at you. So I love the little pustule-like peeling sections in here. Sprachelia formosissima, we were fortunate to see that. Up close, got to one area, and excuse me for not knowing exactly where we were because I was always twisted around. I was trying to follow along on a map, but it was not the easiest thing. But we got to one area where there was a waterfall, and off in the distance on the cliff face, there were Sprachelias just covering the cliff face, and we were able to get up close and personal with a couple of plants. So got some good close-up shots of these. Brian, you're talking about didn't remember any Nolinas. This is one. And here's Bill for the height scale. I don't know. Julia, do you have any idea what Nolina this is going to be over in southwestern Mexico? You think Longifolia? Yeah, that's kind of the catch-all species name. I mean, if it's not described and it has the droopy leaves like this, it's Longifolia. So Longifolia ranges all the way from down in Oaxaca on up into wherever it's undescribed in northern Mexico. But it gets replaced by Nolina matapensis. I don't know if matapensis would get down this far south or not, but up in northwestern Sonora or northwestern Mexico in Sonora and Sinaloa. If that's where we were, that's what I call this. Okay, so we spent some time down around in the Jalisco area, around Guadalajara. So we had to bid our adieus to Martin and Julia and the rest of the gang, and Brian and I had to drive the truck back. So we headed back north, going back to Tucson, and we decided to spend a little time around in here. Julia was so kind to give us some coordinates for some plants that we wanted to see, but she said, now you have to put the blindfold on and get there with the blindfold, otherwise I can't give you the localities. So I'm trying to figure out how am I going to drive with the blindfold on so we can get to the localities, but we managed, and I promptly destroyed all the coordinates that she gave me, so I can't pass them along to anybody because there were some special plans, and we'll see those special plans. Brian and I actually saw these on the way down, but we're going back north, so I'm going to take them out of chronological sequence, so only Brian and I will be confused as to the order of these slides. But Agave impressa is an incredible plant. It's one that, when I was going through Gentry's book, when I was first starting to grow plants, I saw this picture of Agave impressa, and I was like, man, we got to get down and get seed of this. So this was about almost 30 years later. We finally get down to this area, and I see why seed wasn't very readily available. Because, yeah, that's the right orientation. It wasn't laying the other way. It's vertical like that. So we got up close to a couple of plants, and again, the colors on these things are really nice. The really green one out here, and then one that had a little bit of orangey red showing up on the leaves. And then this one with a little bit more orangey red stands out quite nicely against the dark rock there. I really love that plant. Again, it's a little bit frost sensitive for me in Tucson. I had one in my greenhouse in a great big pot, and it got so big that the leaves covered up all the soil. I couldn't get water to it, and you know what happens when plants don't get water and they're in pots? They die, don't they? Here's one that's not quite so colorful. It's a little bit brighter green and not quite as nice a white markings on this one, but still a very pretty plant, very symmetrical plant. One that's got nice color to it. Then Agave nyaritensis. We saw some growing in the trees, so an epiphytic agave there. and I guess I lied about not showing any crassulaceae. So one picture of Graptopetalum marginatum. This one's for Brian. We had to go, I don't know, we're hanging over, taking pictures over the edges of the cliffs, trying to get good shots of this one. It is a very pretty little plant. So then we made our way to the El Salto waterfall. I believe this is in Zacatecas, and we were heading for Pachyphytum saltensis. Yay, I got a Pachyphytum name right. So we're heading to this area to go see Pachyphytum saltensis, and lo and behold, we saw some beautiful plants there. Mammillaria Pattersonii. Now, all you vendors, if there are vendors out here, is anybody growing that? If you are, please save me one. Woody didn't have it. Nobody has it. I'd like to get that. Did I see a hand go up?
We have them. Just bring them to the sale.
Ah, Woody. I'm disappointed in you, man. This is do some negotiation here. Yeah, this is now my favorite mammillaria. This is a beautiful plant. The spine color was incredible color. The way they draped down through the rocks here was just fabulous. It made me forget all about the Pachyphytum, but Brian didn't. So we walked over to the cliff edges, and I saw some more things that were a little bit of more interest to me than the Pachyphytum. While Brian, I figured, you know, he'd go find it, and then I could go get a couple of pictures of it. But I was looking at other things. This Dazzlerian, which remains unidentified to this point. Even David Bogler, who did his PhD on Dazzlerians, I was going through his monograph, and he seemed to just throw up his hands at some point. So I did too, and I just left it as Dazzlerian spa. Our old friend Agave shedigra with a little bit of good color in there, a nice purpley one. On the way out of there, we saw the Ipomea muracoides. I figured this one out from the monograph on the tree Ipomeas. So this was a really nice plant. We saw it along the dry roadside there, and we finally had to stop. There was an area we could pull off and get to a good specimen, even though there were power lines in the background and the gate over here. This is still a really pretty specimen. And we could actually get to some flowers. We took a picture of typical Ipomea, the tree form flowers on this one. Jatropha species, again, another one that Dan likes. Big plants here, so I threw in a couple of things for him as well. Don't know the species. Again, without flowers and leaves and fruits, it's a little bit difficult to identify. We were actually on our way to see this particular plant, or this particular species, Echinocactus grusonii. There's a newly found population over someplace in Zacatecas. We had to drive through the fingers where Zacatecas and Jalisco, thank you, Brian. Zacatecas and Jalisco all kind of finger together, and we counted how many times we crossed the border, like 10 or 12? 13 times. It's like, okay, we crossed from Jalisco to Zacatecas, Zacatecas to Jalisco, and we just kept going and going. We finally got to the place here, and were able to get some photos of the Echinocactus grusonii. We're climbing up around on the hillsides there, and my backpack was getting a little heavy, so I thought, well, I'll just set it down because it's bright yellow, so I'll set it down, and I'll be able to walk around here, take some pictures, and then I'll be able to find it again. So I set it down, I walk over to take some pictures, and I heard a noise, and I looked over, and I had set it carefully so it wouldn't roll. Well, no matter how careful you are, put it up against a tree or hang it in a tree, better yet, because it rolled off and it tumbled down over this cliff and went down about 40 or 50 feet. And I thought, oh crap, all my camera cards were in there, and I said, I'm hoping I zipped up those pockets. Fortunately, we were able to retrieve it, and everything was in there. So, man. It looks very much like the typical golden barrel, maybe a little bit different in its morphology, but as far as I know, it hasn't been split up into a separate subspecies or anything yet. We saw similar plants on this last trip from across the canyon. You could actually get a little bit closer to these. Further north, we went up to Agave Perrii truncata. If you see these in the Huntington, again, they don't look anything like this. This is the type locality at the border of Durango and Zacatecas. They always look like they're dying off. They always have these leaves dying off here. Speculation is that they go through this series of the growing and then the leaves dying off, so they never get a chance to really develop as big as we see them in cultivation. And that's why they stay so much smaller here. You can see that again in this, you know, a goodly portion of these leaves are dying off. So a little bit further on down south in Durango, we see Agave Pentilla, which is a recent split out from Agave Nicholsiae, which is actually the correct name for what we used to call Agave Ferdinand Regis, which had been lumped into Agave Victoria Reginae. And I'm going to leave it to Brian to cover that whole mess when he does his agaves of northeastern Mexico. I love this one. This is a beautifully painted specimen here. It took forever. We had to stop and buy some white paint and some paintbrushes. And it took a couple of hours to do that painting, but we got it done and got some pictures. Some really nice specimens of these. They're smaller plants. They've got much more broadly marked leaves with that white marking there. I'm not sure if the flowers are different. I'm not really sure that, I'm not convinced that this is actually separate from Agave Nicholsiae, but the distribution is quite far away from there.
The inflorescence is about 1/10 the diameter.
Yeah, but it's really dry here. Well, it's really dry in northeastern Mexico as well. Just another shot of one of those. And then this is the best I could come up with. Echinocactus horizontaloneus seemed to be way out of its distribution range there in Durango, but certainly looks like that to me. We saw Echinocerius pectinatus as well. Beautiful little plants. Okay, so we need another recharge after an intense stay in the field, so we'll go see if there's any room at the inn. We leave there and we're going to head for the fabulous Mazatlan-Durango Highway. It doesn't actually go into Mazatlan. It goes to the town of Villa Union, but that doesn't sound as good as Mazatlan-Durango. I mean, Mazatlan's a much bigger city, more well-known. It's the famed Mexico Highway 40. I first traveled that road twice in 1983. I went in the springtime of 1983. I liked it so much that I went with another guy doing some bean research later in the fall in 1983, and then it had been 30 years since I'd been back there. So this is to see the changes in the highway. They're now doing a super highway through there rather than the typical two-lane road going through the mountains. But here it is. Depending on which way you go, it could be the Durango-Mazatlan Highway or the Mazatlan-Durango Highway. We're going from east to west, more or less. And we'll see some fabulous plants up here. Ooh, geez, another one of our old friends, Agave shedigra. This is where I first saw this plant, and up in Durango itself, and I was enamored with it ever since. I did lie about the Echeverias. I decided to show Echeveria dactylifera. I'd seen that one in 1983, and Brian, I don't know if you'd seen that before up here or not, but in cultivation. So I said, oh, yeah, I know where Echeveria dactylifera is up here. And then driving along, we're not seeing it, and I'm starting to feel pretty bad. It's like, oh, geez, you know, now I've got to find these things so Brian can see them in habitat. And we did end up spotting a few of them, and this really red specimen, and then this golden yellow specimen, and then growing with Agave shedigra as well. We had lots of the Echeveria dactylifera. So I really like that one. I've never tried to grow it, but I imagine I'd be able to grow that one in Tucson. We did see this Pitcairnea. I again sent the picture over to Andy, and an answer did not come back within 3 minutes, so I figured he was having a little difficulty trying to identify it, and sure enough, after about an hour, he says, well, Pitcairneas are really hard to identify, but I think it's Pitcairnea, Tim, help me out, Monticola? I get the okay on the Monticola. So I said, okay, I'm going to go with that because nobody's going to know the species on this, so if you know anything different, but it's right in that area. The distribution falls right, or this plant falls right within the distribution of that one, and no others do. So.
Maybe it's in a rhyming.
Well, I'm sticking with this one here. Then we saw Echinocerius huicholensis. I do grow this one in Tucson, and I just love the flowers on that. Sitting up there perched in the little rock ledge for me to get a photo of that one. And then Agave maximiliana, the variety Catherinae up there. A little bit different form than the other maximiliana, a little bit further south. But again, up in the pine oak forest there. And then my favorite. This is the one where I first became aware of Agave pedunculifera, was on that Mazatlan Durango highway. And everything that I see further south looks a little bit different to me. It doesn't quite look like this, but I have not seen all of them in flower there. But I know that range of pedunculifera is supposed to go all the way down into Jalisco and maybe a little bit further south, but it looks awfully different than these plants up here.
How large is it?
How large was the pedunculifera? It's about almost 3 feet in diameter. I suspect it's going to be a little frost sensitive. I was looking for seed there when I went back there in the fall of '83, and I never could find it in seed. But at some point maybe we can find seed from there. So I took you on a tour of agaves and more in western Mexico. We went all the way from Agave guadalajarana, saw some beautiful echinocactus, and I thank you for going along with me on this journey.